So this is the gradient cowl that I made using everyday bobbin yarn from Premier. And this is what I still have left after making this cowl. But go check out the video I just made on this. Here's a link to it. And you'll see all of the unique features about this yarn and why you want to introduce it into your knitting arsenal.
Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click the bell to get notified every time I post.
But the cowl itself, it's a long cowl, and I made it using 2 strands of yarn throughout, but I changed them every 8 repeats. So you get this really lovely gradient change throughout the cowl. So it changes, you'll see a little more white here from here. And then it just keeps getting lighter until you get to the solid white. Oh, no, here's the solid white. And then you get back here, there's just the navy and the periwinkle solid and the white solid here. So it looks great from any direction. It's a nice long cowl. You will be able to wear long and loose or doubled around the neck. So let's check it out right now.
For this project, I used 1 skein of everyday bobbin yarn. It's actually a bobbin, not a skein. And it's got 3 yarns in one. And that's what I used to create this gradient look to my cowl. I also used a pair of size 11 needles, a finishing needle, and a pair of small scissors. Now, before I start my cowl, I'm going to measure off 40 yards of each of the 3 colors. So I have a yardstick, but you can just as easily take a measurement by measuring from the tip of your finger all the way to the tip of your nose, and that is about a yard. You might want to throw in 1 or 2 extra yards just to make sure that you have enough yarn. And we're going to use this yarn when we're using the colors doubled. So you'll use a strand from the bobbin and a strand from this little ball that you've made. Just like a bobbin of thread, this bobbin yarn has notches on both sides of the bobbin so that you can easily set aside the yarn that you're not using and concentrate on the yarn that you will be using. I'm going to start my cowl with the white yarn, and then I'm going to use the other strand of the yarn, the white yarn that I wound. So I'm going to hold those 2 strands together, and now I will make my slip knot and cast on. I'm going to cast on using the long tail cast on method, and I'm just going to hold the 2 strands together and cast on the way I normally would. I leave about a 24-inch tail to cast on the number of stitches I'm going to need, and I cast on a total of 22 stitches for this project, including the slip knot. When I finish casting on, I always take a moment to count the number of stitches on my needle before starting the first row. Before we start row 1, I just want to show you what we're doing. So we're starting this, and we're going to be making 8 repeats, and you can see those ridges help create the last row of the repeat. So it's really easy to just count those spaces in between the ridges, and you can see we have a lacy effect, and it's also a lacy kind of chevron or feather and fan look to it. Row 1 is very easy. We're just going to knit all of the stitches across the row. Take your time while you're working across this first row because it's a little finicky with the cast on, and make sure that you're getting both strands of yarn as you knit each stitch. If you don't, you'll get these weird loops that are sticking out in your project that you don't want to have. So just make sure you're grabbing both strands with every stitch. Row 2 is also very easy. You're just going to purl all of the stitches across the row. Now you've completed rows 1 and 2, and you'll see it's starting to look just like regular stockinette. But now we are on to row 3, and this is where the magic happens in this project. We'll begin row 3 by knitting the first 2 stitches together. Then we'll go on and knit the next 2 stitches together. And now we're going to yarn over, wrap the yarn around the needle counterclockwise, knit 1 stitch, yarn over, knit another stitch, yarn over again, and knit a 3rd stitch. Now yarn over one more time, and now we're going to knit 2 stitches together. Make sure you're getting through both stitches and both strands of yarn so that you don't have any of those weird loops. Now we're going to start that repeat again. So we're going to knit the first 2 stitches together, knit the next 2 stitches together, and now we start our yarn over, knit 1 section. So we're going to yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 1 again, and yarn over, knit a 3rd stitch, and then yarn over and knit 2 together and knit 2 together for those last 2 stitches on the needle. So that was easy. If you've made it across this row, you've made it through the hardest part of this project. So you can see that is where we create these eyelets and this feather and fan effect. Now what happens on the next row is we're going to knit, and we're going to knit on the wrong side of the work. So that's going to create that nice garter ridge that you see on the front of the work. So row 4 is knit all of the stitches across the row. Now that we've created one whole repeat of the project, you can see there's our garter ridge and our eyelets, and the waviness of this project is starting to show. So as you keep working, it will get more and more wavy. So now we're going to go and keep working the next repeat, and we'll do this so that we have 8 repeats of the pattern, and then we will change yarns. When you're keeping track of rows, sometimes it's easy to get tripped up. So I use this little tool called the Kacha Kacha counter. And this is the mini Kacha Kacha, which has an opening so that you can put a string around it if you wanted to attach it to your knitting bag or even wear it around your neck. And you just click it every time you've completed a row. Now I have 2 sections completed, but let's just say for the purpose of this video that I've completed all 8 sections. So it's time to trim my yarn and add a new color and start another 8 section repeat with the new color and one of the strands of the old color. So I'm going to take the color in the middle along with the white yarn that I just used, and I'm going to use both skeins and both strands that are now from the bobbin instead of using one of the skeins that I rolled up of 40 yards, if that makes sense. So now I'm going to hold those 2 new yarns together and knit the next row just like I started with row 1 of my repeats. You can see after just a few stitches that my color is changing and how nice that looks, but here it is in the project. So I go from white to white and the next color, which is kind of a twisted color combination. We'll call that color B. So I use color A together, and then I use color A and B, and I'm going to do 8 repeats. And then when I get to finish those 8 repeats, I'm going to use the 2 color B's together. So the strand that I set aside along with the bobbin of color B. And I'll hold those together for 8 more repeats. When I finish that section, then I'm going to set aside that skein that I wound off, or ball that I wound off, and then I'm going to use color B, and now I'm going to introduce a strand of color C, and these are both going to come from the bobbin. And I'll knit those together for 8 repeats to create the next section. And when I finish that, I'm going to use my 40 yards of color C along with color C from the bobbin. I'll hold those together, and that will be the solid section. Then finally, I'm going to wrap it up with color A and C held together. When I finish that repeat, then I'm going to bind off, and I'm going to join these together by just sewing the seams together. You can see how nice and neat that looks. And my cowl is finished. Check out more free projects at NobleKnits, and I'll see you in the next video.